Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I just wanted to talk about some eyeshadow palettes I have used recently through basically I would say from January to June, and I'm just gonna rank them as well from least
liked or used to the I enjoyed them
just
most.
discuss my thoughts on them, some maybe more briefly, and if I do have pictures or video of the looks I have created with any of these, I will try to put those in the video. Some of them I do not have looks with them. I just created them and out the door I kind of went, and didn't really have time to video or take pictures of it. So, and some of them I just don't think they were worth recreating a look with them. So that's partly why I'm not going to do that. I am sorry there is a lot of noise possibly in this video because they're doing road work outside. If it's really bad, I may just redo this, so I'm not sure. We'll see. So I'm gonna start off with my least and work my way through the palettes I've used. So for me, the ColourPop Social Butterfly palette, I don't know. I found that the first time I put this on my eyes, I was just not happy with the way the look was coming together. I don't think there's enough shades for me to create a look I was happy with. I did take that off and reused the palette again, placing the colors in a different way. It did look pretty, but I don't know. I think I can't really rank it as a favorite for me. I just think there was better color ways, and it just didn't make me happy with it. So I'm just gonna put it at the bottom.
So this is the look I did create with this ColourPop palette.
This one here, I'm kind of shocked I don't love it more because of the color. I don't know why I feel the way I do, so. But this is the BH Optimistic AF palette. This is what it looks like. And I do think it's a beautiful palette. I do think it performs really well. I just kind of wish there was more shimmers. I feel these two are kind of repetitive with this here. I don't think I would have liked a much more vibrant, shimmery orange shade. Just being honest. They do perform beautifully, don't get me wrong. It's just the color story kind of isn't quite what I wanted it to be. So for me, that's why I'm putting it. I would still use this in the fall. I think it would be really beautiful for that, but it just isn't my favorite.
These are the looks I came up with the BH Cosmetics palette.
So for the next palettes I'm ranking, I chose the Poem and the Couplet palettes from ColourPop. I just feel these are kind of tied. They're not bad in quality, but I do think they just don't really bring anything new to my collection. I do think they're great for traveling. I would do that. I would grab these and just go wherever I'm going. I think they would perform well enough for that. I don't think they're bad palettes, but that's how I kind of feel about them. Next, I chose the BH Cosmetics Low Key Love You palette. I actually think this is a very beautiful palette. I did create a really beautiful look with it. I just feel that I just don't love it. And I don't hate it. But yeah, I just feel this is more, you know, they do perform really well, I will say. So, wish I would have gotten the green palette of that. That would have been probably the palette more my type.
This is the look I came up with using the other BH Cosmetics palette.
So next is the ColourPop Harmony palette. I actually really like this palette. I like the color story. It is warm neutrals. I do like it. It's a nice palette. Nothing negative to say. So for these next palettes, I would kind of consider them mid. I don't love them, but I don't hate them, and I do think they were nice palettes. I do have some things to say on them though. The first one is the Vegan Beauty Planet Fanatic Fully Recyclable Wet Dry Eyeshadow Palette. I've used all of these shades. I absolutely love this green. I think that is the most beautiful green. I loved these as well. I think the shimmers on the most part are really good. The mattes do take some building, but you do get there. I would say my biggest fear is dropping this or just the packaging itself being a little more fragile. I wouldn't travel with this. I do think it's a beautiful palette. I created many different beautiful looks with this, and I actually would reach for this quite often. I think it's one of those palettes that if I'm going to be running out the door, I have 10 minutes to do my makeup, I would grab this palette. And that would be my opinion on that. I do think it is easier to work with. So I just do feel I have things that I do like that I did play with a little more. Next is the Maple Syrup Pancakes Too Faced palette. I don't dislike this palette. I would say overall it did perform all quite well. I created a lot of different looks with this. This Morning Matcha shade, I will say, can be a little harder to get it to blend out. And I did notice sometimes it kind of just wouldn't blend out. And I would reach for some of these other shades to kind of help with that. But that would be my biggest negative. And I don't really love powdered sugar. It's like I don't know, matte with some shimmer to it. I didn't love it. But overall it did perform better than some shadows. It just isn't my favorite. I do think it is a beautiful color story, and I love the names the names are very cute, and it is within the parameters of Too Faced palettes. But I don't know. I'm not in love with it. That's pretty much all I can say. I do like this better than their Better Than Chocolate palette. The shimmers in that made me sad because I loved the colors and the actual different tone colors within the shimmer shades themselves, but it just would not perform very well, and it took a lot of finicking and working with it to get those shades to work. I did create a ton of looks, at least 7 looks with that palette. I have given it away since then. My daughter has it. I don't know if she has played with it or anything, but it made me sad. And I was like, this is not Better Than Chocolate. I'm sorry, it just isn't. So I think this was definitely better than that palette.
These are the different looks I came up with using this Too Faced palette. I overall did enjoy playing with it.
So next up is the Urban Decay Naked, Half Baked, and Foxy eyeshadow palettes. I've used these just to create a quick look and out the door. I do enjoy these palettes for that. That is the Foxy palette and Color Story. I just think this is really pretty. It performs decently. A couple of brushes and I'm out the door. And this one is the Half Baked palette. I don't really think the names work with like what the Color Story is. Maybe, I don't really know, but they do perform really well. I just, for the reason of the Color Stories are more simple, is why they're where they're at. Not really performance problem whatsoever.
These are looks I created with these palettes. This is older pictures, but I have used them more recently as well.
I ranked the Tartlet in Bloom Amazon Clay palette and the Tartlet Toasted Amazon Clay palette. I got these on sale, and I do understand where they could be good. So that is what the Tartlet in Bloom palette looks like. I think this performs well. Some of the deeper shades to me don't always blend the way I want them to, or maybe are just a little more pigmented than I want them to be. I don't really, but I do understand, like, if you were a working makeup artist, this would be a good palette to work with. It does have a lot of the shades you might need for that. I kind of thought the In Bloom would be more pinks, purples, florals. Now, I did use some of the shades in today's look from there. So I used Rocker, Flower Child, and Charmer, and Sweetheart, just to blend along with another palette, which I will be mentioning. I do think it performs well. It does have a vanilla scent, so if you are sensitive to scented makeup or anything like that, it is something to note. I chose the Tartlet Toasted palette over it because I like the warmer tones of this better. But I will say the deeper shade sometimes it was a little harder to work with on this. Maybe that's just me, I don't know, but I do just love the warmer tones of this palette more. But I think between these two, if you were working in makeup, you know, all the time, I could see these maybe being something you would put in a kit, maybe for that reason. These next two, I don't know why they surprised me, because they shouldn't have, but I felt they needed to be a little higher up because of how well they performed. And honestly, I really loved the looks that I created with them. So I chose the Makeup Revolution Reloaded Pink Prosciutto palette that I tried at the beginning of the year. This came in the advent calendar from last year. I think this really performed quite well. I did not struggle with much. Some of the deeper shades needed more building, a little more time to build them, but it wasn't impossible to work with. So for that reason, I'm kind of giving them like these surprised me kind of grade. Next is the Essence Welcome to Marrakesh eyeshadow palette. I think this performed quite well. I will say the black and this shade here took also some building, but they did build. I don't know if I would probably try to use this as like a black shade, but I think it does deepen a shade quite well, and but overall I actually think this palette is really beautiful, and it's one, if I want to just do a simple basic look, I can, but I can add in a little touch of color. The mattes, the lighter mattes, especially these two, this one here did take a little more to build up, but it did build up. So for me, I actually think this is I would consider this a nice palette. For the cost, I wouldn't be upset by it. So on to some more palettes. So I'm considering this kind of mid, is the ColourPop 1111 pressed powder palette. I think that this is nice, but for some reason I don't want to reach for it, and that I don't really understand. It's not bad performance-wise, and that is what the color story looks like. I do think it's a beautiful color story. I do think it performed quite well. It wasn't really hard to work with. This shade here I don't love at all, and this shade, Reflect and Manifest It, I don't really like that the glitter there was just fallout from that all throughout the day, so I didn't care for that, and that's kind of why I'm ranking it where I am. I don't kind of think it's a pretty palette, and that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. One I kind of liked a little more was the Off Melrose ColourPop palette. I picked this up from Winners, and I kind of just kept reaching for it and playing with it. I don't know if I have any looks or pictures with it, but I did create many different looks. I liked everything. The only one I don't really love is the glitter. I mean, I did use some glitter glue and used it, but I would prefer it to be a shimmer shade instead, like a nice beautiful rose gold, that same color but no glitter involved would be, to me, better. I think this shade, and this shade would probably be my favorite of the shimmers. I just think it performed really well. It applied easily. The mattes and shimmers overall worked well. And I kind of think because of this greenish gold shade, it kind of makes me like it more. Maybe just because it's green and that is one of my favorite colors. I don't know. So on to my, I would say, top ones I've been reaching for and loving, and ones that I just want to keep making more looks with. Although some of these here I have done that too. But these ones are my very favorites. Coming up next. So up next, I am showing you two of the Lorac palettes. This is Unzipped Shimmer and Matte Eyeshadow Palette. I created a few different looks with this palette. I just think it's really beautiful. The shimmers are beautiful and it just performed really well. I didn't find a struggle to work with the mattes or the shimmers, and it was something that I would just grab this palette and off I go kind of palette. I don't know if I have any pictures or video with any of this. If I do, as I said, I will add them in here, but I really love this palette. I have been reaching for this and the Lorac Gold palette throughout the summer and earlier spring. This is the Lorac Unzipped Gold palette. I have been grabbing this palette repeatedly, and I keep grabbing this and the Lorac shimmer I used in one of my using all the samples I've gotten. This came as a gift with purchase for buying some of the Lorac stuff. This with this has been a combination I've been wearing on my eyes repeatedly this summer. I just love this palette. The mattes are rather easy to work with. The shimmers look really good. And when I top it with this shimmery gold in quartz shade, I just think it's just been something I have loved. And I know I have a few different palettes that are probably very similar, but for some reason I just love the performance and just the shimmers and the way they look more.
This is the look I created using the Lorac Gold palette.
So my very top 3 favorite palettes I have tried entire half year. So for my third top palette is the ColourPop Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Pressed Powder Palette. I think this is adorable. I loved the performance of the shadows. I didn't really struggle too much to blend the mattes or work with the shimmer shades. I felt they all performed quite well, and the color story suits the nostalgia of this. So I had to give this third place. I think this is one that is really beautiful, and I do think that I would grab this and just create a quick look and out the door with it. So for that, I gave it third in today's ranking. Second top favorite palette is the Beauty Bay Reckless Romance palette. This is also what is on my eyes. So I used the shades number 1 Fling, Soulmate, Girlfriend, Encore, and Rockstar, along with the shades from the Tarte in Bloom palette. I think this palette has stayed in my mind the most of all of the palettes that I have used. It keeps beckoning me back to play with it more, and I think that says a lot about a palette. And I feel like Beauty Bay kind of has that ability, at least for me, to keep making me want to grab their palette out and play with it. And that really does say a lot for me. So my very top favorite had to go to the Odin's Eye Merry Christmas palette. I have created a lot of looks with this palette, and I love the color story. It is definitely so Christmas, but I do think you could create a look that could work for not Christmas. And I created a more grungy, I consider, eye look using the happy ending and some of these shades here, and I felt it really performed so beautifully. This black shade was one of the easiest dark black shades I've ever worked with, and despite how pigmented it was, I was still able to get it to blend out. The shimmers are quite nice, and I like this, the overall color story is very beautiful. I do have looks with this palette as well as all of the top 3 palettes, and quite a few of the others mentioned. Some of them I have not, but I have been using them repeatedly in the background, but this one for me had to be top. It has shimmer shades that to me are more special shades. They just appear so gorgeous on the eyes that I just cannot. I keep thinking of the one grungy look I did with this palette, and I just can't wait to do it again. So for me, it has to be one of my top of the palettes I've tried thus far in 2024.
This is another look I created with the Odin's Eye Christmas palette.
So those are my favorite palettes of the first 6 months of 2024. I continue to grab different palettes and play with them. These so far some of these will definitely rank high in my end of year favorite eyeshadow palettes without a doubt. I hope you enjoyed watching and listening to me talk about eyeshadow palettes, because I really do enjoy eyeshadow. It is my favorite step of makeup. I just love that, as well as just the whole look coming together would be my favorite part of makeup. So I hope you enjoyed. I thank you so much for watching. I also will say, if there is a palette here that you love and I didn't rank it as high, it's all preference, really. I don't always like everything that everyone else might like, and you may not either, and that's okay. So I just hope you enjoyed watching. I thank you so much for doing so. I hope you have a wonderful day. Okay.